If you've had lower back pain or sciatica for longer than 3 months, then this hidden block might be the reason why you're not well on your way to recovery and being pain-free again. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatiga, the lead osteopath and spine specialist here at Back in Shape, and we help people around the UK and all over the world fix their back pain and get back in shape for the long term. And in today's podcast, we're going to help you understand how this block has been preventing your recovery and how to overcome it once and for all. Because you've probably been told more than once that back pain generally goes away in a couple of weeks. So why are we still here 3 months on and still struggling? The thing with the lower back is it's very different to many of the other areas of the body. You'll have injured your wrist, ankle, knee, shoulder, etc., or know someone that has. And when we injure those, 9 times out of 10, we can take the bad one out of the equation. It's in a cast, it's in a sling, it's got some strapping, we've maybe got crutches, so that that one can recover on its own whilst the other ones take their fair share. The issue with the lower back is we don't have a spare, we don't have a backup. And when it's in its most vulnerable position in the early days, weeks, and maybe months after that first injury, we can't effectively take the strain off that lower back. So we don't ever give it its respite. Furthermore, we probably have been doing things differently as a result of the pain, trying to shy away from certain things. And that's resulted in muscle loss. But with your lower back, you don't see the difference the same way as the leg that's in cast for 6 weeks. When it comes out, you can clearly see there is a difference. So you're extra aware of the weakness that has developed over that relatively short period of time out of action. You just don't see that in the lower back. So it's not something you're conscious of, and therefore you don't make adjustments to deal with that. But what's worse is that most people that have long-standing lower back pain and don't just bounce back in that couple of weeks often don't have good physical condition to start with before they injure their back. And perhaps that's actually one of the factors that led to the back being vulnerable and injured in the first place. There's just not the physical conditioning in place to protect it effectively. So it's at risk of going from certain activities or being overstrained or spending too much time in the office. All these practices subconsciously start to eke away at the resilience of our body. So when we do come and have an injury and then we do even less, we've got so much less capacity, physical conditioning to lose. So when we do lose what little we had, we're in an even more troublesome position. Quite frankly, many of us don't think of our lower back until we actually have a problem. And therefore it's something we take for granted. We don't condition, we don't take care of it. The same way in which, for example, we brush our teeth every day or do many other practices to keep other areas of our body in good condition. A great example, especially those that have really long-standing lower back pain, we're talking about months to years, and it's not getting better. Often, even before you had the back injury, you've got that all too familiar, all too common habit of getting out of a chair. That one bit of daily exercise, let's say, that could actually involve strengthening your legs, holding your body correctly, and developing or retaining some strength. We tip ourselves out, we kind of just use momentum to flop out of the chair. So when we then lose what little we had as a result of being injured for a couple of weeks to a couple of months, or even longer, we really are at a baseline level of physical conditioning that is just not acceptable. And few people with chronic lower back pain actually take stock and go, I'm actually really not very strong at all. So one of the first steps to actually resolving this is actually to take stock of what your real level of physical conditioning is. Are you coordinated? Are you able to move? Are you able to do simple movements like squats or bending forwards without getting any pain, without getting any erroneous movements happening, mistakes, bending, twisting of the lower back? Do you actually have control over your own body without experiencing pain? If you're struggling with back pain for longer than 3 to 4 months, then there's a very good chance that the answer to that in one or more areas is going to be no. It's just not acceptable. The good news is, however, we've had thousands of members come through the program, the same number of patients that we've seen over the years, and most people fit into that bucket. They don't have the strength, they don't have the control, they're lacking fundamental skills that enable the back to recover effectively and massively reduce the risk of injury for the long term. And the good thing is that you can actually start to do something about that. But you have to be honest with yourself about your current level of status quo. Because if you expect that you actually are competent in many of these movements, then you're going to get really disheartened really quickly when you start trying to do stuff and keep on having flare-ups or having flare-ups from day-to-day basis from doing quote-unquote nothing at all. But the moment you're honest with yourself about your current level of competence when it comes to the physical domain, you can actually be prepared for some of these challenges as they go forwards. So we're moving towards the point where we actually tell you what this hidden block is. But hopefully, if you've gotten this far, you've actually been able to, at least briefly, while you've been watching the video, have a mental appraisal of your current level of conditioning. And you've kind of concluded that maybe it's not actually as good as I thought it was, and maybe I do have some room for improvement. And a great telltale sign of this is that you can't go a couple of days or weeks without having a random flare-up for quote-unquote nothing. You know, bending down to pick your socks up or put your socks on, or picking something out of the car, some really insignificant thing that keeps on causing that back to flare up. And that's a big sign that actually we're not as competent as we should be, so we can move forwards. So provided you've got an effective plan, and we talk about that within the program, we talk about that on the YouTube channel, we've got many, many videos that talk about the right sort of way to rehabilitate the back, then you can start to move forwards to address these things, address these inefficiencies, address these weaknesses, and start to make improvement. But there is only one way you're going to do that, and that is by practicing the right sort of exercises regularly. And the simple fact of the matter is, while you're doing this, you're still going to be living life. You're still going to be doing everything. We have, in the thousands of people that we've come across, and we've had many more thousands, tens of thousands of people interact with us, and they used to always fill out this little form that would tell us what stage of disability they're currently in. Are they bedbound? Are they able to move around the house? Of the tens of thousands of those that we've received, a fraction of 1% are ever bedbound. More or less everybody is moving, and chances are you are too. So if you know you can't do many of these exercises, yet you're still living life because you have to, because we still have to go to work, because we still might have young children, we still might have to look after the grandchildren, we still have a garden that needs to be taken care of, and we still need to get out of bed and go downstairs every morning, we're likely to be vulnerable on a daily basis. And that brings us to the big thing. It's relapses. When they happen for quote unquote no reason, how do you respond to them? Because it's how you respond to these relapses that is the hidden block that's stopping you getting better and recovering from back pain or sciatica for the long term. Too many people will have a flare-up outside of the exercises, and they'll go, oh, well, my back's bad. It's bad for a couple of days. I won't do anything. I'll just stop. And know that when you say you're doing nothing, you're actually not doing nothing. You're doing something. You're doing a bunch of other stuff that's not focused, not moving you towards recovery, and probably re-aggravating the fundamental areas that are causing your lower back pain. You're still going to be getting out of the chair. You're still going to be visiting the bathroom. You might even end up going to A&E or the hospital for further checks, which will still involve you getting in a car. It'll still involve you getting out of a seat. You get the idea. And you're not 100% focused when you're doing those things. And therefore, errors can creep in. It might be that you had a specific aggravation during an exercise while you were focused. And that's an opportunity to take stock and say, what did I do wrong? Where precisely did I make the mistake or error? At what point in that dead bug exercise, for example, did I lose control of my spine, allow it to move and aggravate the facet joint on the bottom left-hand side of my lumbar spine? Or at what point in the squatting motion did I lose control of my lumbar spine and round my lower back, compressing that L5-S1 disc and stretching the ligaments on the back part of the spine? These reflection points, how you react to the aggravation, both within the exercises and, more commonly, is the cause, outside of the exercises, will dictate whether you go round and round in circles or whether you start to use these lessons to springboard you to step from one onto the other into a recovery process. It's incredibly disheartening to hear when people have some sort of aggravation outside of the exercises, because remember, often your exercises might be half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour of the day, but there's 23 other hours. Obviously, 8 of those you might be sleeping for, but you're doing many other things in the interim. That is where the problem arises. And that's inevitably going to be a problem. If you can barely lie on the floor and wiggle your leg, or if you can barely bend down and do a squat with appropriate form without your spine moving all over the place. So what's a better option? To stop doing the exercises, or to drill down to the exercise and stop doing everything else, or try and mitigate or minimize doing everything else, while you have that one time of the day to 100% be focused on exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. Maybe even with the smartphone that you're watching this video on next to you, so you can see your form and actually really commit to getting better. Because there are lots of things that we can all do if we really take this seriously, by actually setting up recordings of what you're doing, really evaluating within the workout and outside the workout and after the workout, whatever exercise it may be, to evaluate where did we go wrong and how can we make it better. Because it's only through making errors within the exercises, the rehabilitative work, that you actually get lessons to improve, to lessen the risk and likelihood of making errors in the future. Making errors outside of the exercises while you're at home, pottering around the house or boiling the kettle or doing whatever else, has zero benefit to your recovery. It only aggravates you, sets you back, makes you in pain. But even if you are unlucky enough to get things wrong, which is to be expected, because quite frankly, if you already knew how to do some of these basic movements and the progressions, then you wouldn't have back pain, or you would have been one of those that does recover in a couple of weeks. But making those mistakes within the workouts and then reflecting on them gives you something. It gives you these little building blocks as you steadily start to piece together your back stability. If you're watching this and you're not one of our members and maybe you've been following the channel, I definitely point out 2 resources that are going to be really helpful for you, and they're full tutorials to the dead bug exercise, link down in the description, and how to do squats. Again, link down in the description. know that you've probably seen these exercises before. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't approach exercise with this humility. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I blah, blah, blah. I can go and do it. I've been told how to do this before. And you get it wrong. That's why, for example, in the membership, where we have the program structured out, we've got one exercise. So let's say the modified dead bug. And we've got another exercise, maybe the squat. But there are 10 or 15 different videos on errors that different people make when they do these. So you can start to piece together your specific errors and learn to get them right. And know that you do need to be that consistent about it. You do need to be that analytical about it so you can get better. Because too many people, when they have back pain for longer than 3-4 months, unfortunately we have many that have back pain for longer than that, they feel helpless, they feel despondent, they feel like there's nothing they can do, but there are lots of tools. And once you start to use those tools, you'll start to actually make improvement. If you find 10 ways that don't work for you, there's going to be an 11th that you can try. There's going to be a 12th that you can try. So you can steadily make small improvements here and there to start to build the foundational blocks of back stability so that your back can start to heal and recover and regenerate. So there's a few bits there for you. Ultimately, the hidden block is up here. It's how you choose, consciously or otherwise, to react to setbacks. You can either choose to throw in the towel and say, it's not for me, or you can be honest with yourself and say, there's lots of things I don't know how to do, and I'm not doing effectively, or haven't done to their completion. And if you are humble enough to acknowledge the second is the case, then you can start working towards building back up from the ground up effectively, checking off the things that you currently can't do and putting them firmly in the bucket of things you can do. Ultimately, you cannot fail if you don't give up. And if you start out, you can only lie down, for example, with the dead bugs you mentioned earlier, and you can only wiggle your leg 3 times. That's not a lot of stability. What on earth's happening to you on a daily basis when you're up and about? There's not going to be a lot of stability there if you can't even control one leg lying on the floor. But when you go from not being able to control one leg for 3 reps to being able to do 6, and then maybe you can do 3 sets of 10, and then you can move on further, you can do a more advanced variation, you know you're making real improvement. You know that you might not be there yet, but you are moving in the right direction. And steadily, as healing starts to take place, as you start to shore your body up from the stresses and strains of daily life, you'll start to gather momentum. You'll start to be able to do more. You'll then start to be able to progress further through to more advanced tactics and exercises, using load, using resistance, like what we talk about on the YouTube channel and for members in the membership area. And you'll start to be able to steer the ship of your back pain recovery and move away from this terrible cycle of going round and round in circles to start going towards having a stronger back. Simply put, to getting your back in shape again. Hopefully you did find this episode of the podcast helpful. It's made you think about some things, especially if you've been struggling for a long period of time. Do know that you can do an awful lot, but you've got to approach these things in a smarter way. Yes, you need to lean on some resources, some tools to help you get there, but the results, the outcome is firmly in your hands. And we know this from experience. We've seen enough people with enough awful objective diagnoses, spondylolistheses, surgeries, injections that haven't worked, treatments that haven't worked, 10, 15, 20 years of back pain. You can check out more on the reviews page and read some of the other members' stories that have even been featured in the UK media over here. Some really inspiring stories of people with really bad backs that have done some really hard work to get really good results. And you definitely can too, if you just stick at it and use the tools that are there and don't give up, because that way you can't fail. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you've got any questions, comments, or anything on the subject matter of today's podcast, check out the comment section below as we read and reply to all of those. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.